Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about AI compared to a lot of the stuff that you might see on LinkedIn and in the news. We're going to talk about how we can bring people and technology together to do amazing things, and we'll get quite philosophical towards the end. We'll talk about the macro impact that these technologies are going to have on society. So I've been involved in AI for about 25 years. My undergraduate, PhD, postdocs are all in AI from UCL, where I'm currently entrepreneur in residence, so I help them spin out deep tech companies. I started a company about 18 years ago that's been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world, Tesco, PwC. I sold that to WPP despite knowing nothing about marketing, and I still like to claim I know nothing about marketing because it allows me to ask stupid questions, but I run now AI across about 120,000 people, and I get to now invest and start companies in AI. I just started a company to solve machine consciousness, so if we want to go very deep today, we can. That's me, it's boring. Let's talk about AI. So I guess for the past 10, 15 years, we've been told that to build data lakes, put Tableau on top of some sort of analytics layer, hire data scientists, machine learning experts, and by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it'll lead to better decisions. If I'm honest with you, giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. Companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems, and decision making is a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. Always start out with a decision and work backwards. What tends to happen is we get very excited about new technologies. 15 years ago it was data, now it's generative AI. We then apply those technologies to solving the wrong problems. People then blame the technology, but the reality is that humans are not very good at understanding what the right technologies are to solve the right problems. So today I'm going to try and solve that for you. It turns out that humans are rubbish at making decisions. I don't know if you've read the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. There are many books out there that will convince you that humans are not good at making decisions. Daniel argues that we have a fast brain and a slow brain, and there are parallels in terms of how these brains work with how AIs work, which I'll talk about later on. I'm going to test your brains now. I know it's late in the day, I know I'm between you and drinks, but I'm going to ask you some maths questions, okay? And your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible. If you don't answer them fast in your competition, they're going to take your market. So speed is important. We'll start out nice and easy. So first question, nice and easy. What's 2 times 2? Okay, great. What's 46? Okay, point here, this one you use your fast brain, this one you have to go through an algorithm or process to get the answer. I'll ask you a few more maths questions again. We'll start out nice and easy, we'll get more complicated. The combined price of a bat and a ball is €1.10. The bat is €1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? Okay, you knew the answer already though, didn't you? Yeah, you did. If you thought 10 cents, you're not broken, but what you did is you use your intuition. The bat is actually €1.05, the ball is 5 cents, the combined price is €1. So we use our intuition every day, making confidently wrong decisions. And it's really important to understand what is it that humans are good at and what is it that humans are bad at. Another maths question. Imagine you've got a delivery van, and your delivery van has to deliver packages around these 24 points. Humans are quite good at solving these spatial problems. After a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path? The one that's going to save the most amount of time, energy, petrol? How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path? Yeah, somewhere between milliseconds and 20 billion years. If you've got 24 times 23 times 20, 24 factorial, exclamation mark we learned in school, into your calculator, you get that number of roots. That's how many solutions there are around 24 points. If you had a computer that could check 1 million solutions a second, it would take 20 billion years to go through all of them and say, this one that I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one, you should do that. If I had another point, the map becomes 25 times 20 billion years, 5,000 billion years. If I had another point, the map becomes 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get ugly very quickly. You have lots of them across your organizations. They're either being solved by people very badly or probably by algorithms very badly. The point here is if you choose the wrong algorithm, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe to solve this problem. If you choose the right algorithm, it will take milliseconds. That is the opportunity cost in choosing the wrong algorithm. Okay, if I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. Does anybody know the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again, expecting a different answer. I would controversially argue that by definition, automation is stupid. I know that everybody that currently touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients, we get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition is the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. And the reason why it's popular is because for most people, AI started 3 years ago with ChatGPT. And when we get machines to be able to correspond in natural language, recognize objects and images, when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. And again, there's lots of books out there that will convince you that humans are not that intelligent. Benchmarking machines against humans is a very stupid thing to do. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence. This is from the 1980s. It's a beautiful definition. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. So goal-directed in the sense you're trying to route your vehicles to maximize deliveries or allocate your workforce to maximize happiness or spend your marketing money to maximize return. You have to have a goal. Behavior is how quickly and well we can move towards that goal. Now, we've just discovered if you choose the wrong method, it will take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right method, it will differentiate your business. But the key word in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being totally honest with you all, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. Almost everything in production right now is automation. So if I held what we do in industry to this definition, one might controversially argue that nobody's doing AI, which is of course ridiculous because we're all doing AI. But the point here is that using definitions, using technologies to think about AI is not very helpful. It's confusing. So I'm going to give you a different framework. Before I do, a little bit of a history lesson. So this is AI in the 60s and 70s. This is Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and that all men are mortal, I can infer new knowledge. I can infer that Socrates is mortal. AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world to try to infer new knowledge. It didn't really work. It didn't really scale. This is now having a renaissance. It's called agentic computing. We'll talk about this later. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeled on how our brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 20 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. Bumblebees do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds and they recognize objects. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle windows very well. But ultimately, they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million brain cells in a machine? 20 years ago, we couldn't, but we can now model billions of brain cells. And we currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are really good at knowing things about the world. They're really good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. They're not good at making predictions right now, and they're definitely not good at making complex decisions. Okay, this is not a panacea that's going to solve all of our problems. That said, they are getting smarter. So large language models about 10 years ago were a bit like toddlers. They regurgitated some words. Most of it didn't make sense. 3 years ago, ChatGPT was launched. Arguably, ChatGPT is like an intoxicated graduate. Okay, so 50% at least of what ChatGPT comes out with is confidently incorrect. All right, and that said, again, we are moving now to a master's level where it can do rudimentary reasoning and start to check itself. This year, next year, we'll have a PhD level, something that can take complex problems and solve them. I think in the next 2 years, we'll have a postdoc, something that can apply complex scientific apparatus to solve problems. And then by the end of this decade, it's predicted that we'll have a professor in our pocket. Now, even a professor in our pocket can't solve that routing problem in its head. What it can do is use algorithms to solve the problem or build algorithms to solve the problem. Okay, it's really important to understand that there are other algorithms that you need to solve your problems. Okay, so ignore this, not important. So I look at the world through, not through definitions, but applications. And I believe there are 6 categories of friction that exists across any supply chain in any industry that can be mapped to this framework. That's a bold statement, but all of the pain points that you feel can be addressed by this application. The first one actually is task automation. I know I poo-pooed it, but the fact is if you use very simple algorithms, if-then-else statements, macros, robotic process automation, you can drive a massive amount of value. You don't need to gravitate to new shiny technologies like generative AI and machine learning. You can do a massive amount of value with simple algorithms. The second category is content generation. Now, large language models give everybody the ability to create generic content, text, imagery, now sound and video. This is cute, but it's not going to differentiate your business. Okay, the battleground for organizations is not creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. That last mile is extremely hard. We have to do this in WPP. We call these brand brains in WPP. A brand brain is trying to produce production-grade, brand-specific content. I'm going to geek out a second because it's really important to understand there are 4 ways broadly of making a brain smart. The first way is by asking it better questions. So we've heard this already. By better prompting, you're able to get better responses, but you're only going to be bounded by the knowledge of that brain. The second way of making an intoxicated graduate smart is by, in this case, giving it your brand guidelines, your written copy, your imagery, asking it to create an ad, and just like an intoxicated graduate, it'll probably get to about 50% good. This is called ragging. We can all build it in minutes. The third way of making a brain smart is turning that graduate into an expert. Now, we know how long it takes humans to become experts. It takes years of training and trial and error, iteration, blood, sweat, tears. In the AI world, there's only a handful of models that you can tune and train, and it takes months to turn them into experts. It's a very hard problem. What we do in WPP when we're creating brand brains, we mimic the real world. We create a council of experts, an expert at your imagery, your written copy, your tone of voice, your company values, your brand guidelines. And just like in the real world, you get these different agents collaborating and communicating to get to an answer greater than the sum of the parts. The power of agents isn't agency. The power of agents is what's already been mentioned today, multi-agent reasoning, getting to collaborate and communicate to come up with better solutions than the parts. We've also heard this today. We know we can use AIs to replace people in call centers with things that look and behave exactly like a human. But one of the most powerful ideas to take away today is a concept that we call audience brains. So for the first time ever, we can build brains that recreate how people think and feel about things. Historically, if I show you an ad or a policy or some promotional material, I didn't know what goes on in your mind and body unless I ask you. And people are not very good at reporting on what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, we can build brains that recreate those signals. And we can use those signals to now create better content and use them to more accurately predict activation. And unlike brand brains, where the complexity, why is that not going backwards? The complexity is how you tune and train and pipeline these technologies. The differentiator for audience brains is just data. Okay, so historically in marketing, there's been an impulse to collect people's names, addresses, dates of birth, gender. How old you are and where you live is a proxy for who you are. How you perceive an ad or whatever will depend on whether you've just fallen in love, how much money you have in your account, the time of the day, how well your football team played at the weekend. Understanding the data that you need to build representative audiences is a differentiator, and that's not typically PPI data. And actually, AI is getting really good at understanding what is it that human beings value. You know, we used to sell faster, better, cheaper. This is a very nice paper from Harvard Business Review back in 2016. What somebody did was map 30 things that human beings value to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And AI is getting really good at understanding what people value and how to activate them. Let me ask you a question. If I said to you, what product or brand do you think about if I say safe cars? Okay. What about extreme sports? Red Bull? What about Christmas? Coca-Cola. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm activating some neurons in your brain. I'm asking you to activate your product neurons. You have no choice but to say Volvo. And what's happening is that those brains are tightly coupled. Those neurons are tightly coupled. The goal of marketing is to reinforce or decouple those connections. And that's not through personalized ads. If I asked you what ads do you remember, they weren't personalized ads. They were ads that connected you to a moment, to a shared experience emotionally. Coming up with ads that connect you to brands emotionally is still very much in the realm of human beings. Okay. The fourth category is what people called AI before generative AI. It's machine learning. You all know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So again, if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks and the likes and the sales. But what machine learning can do, it can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. It's a terrible example. I need a better example. But the point is that machine learning can surface insights from data in ways that human beings can't, and we can use those insights to make better decisions. And that is not the world of generative AI. Oh, we'll talk about it later. The next category is complex decision making. So in our world, we're now creating content very quickly. We're able to test it against synthetic audiences. We're able to predict activation. Our next challenge is how do you push that content across channels to maximize return? This is an optimization problem. And let's just remind ourselves how complicated optimization problems are. Imagine you have 5 pieces of content to allocate to 5 channels, or 5 staff members to allocate to 5 jobs. It doesn't really matter. So how many possible solutions are there? How many ways can I allocate 5 people to 5 jobs, or 5 pieces of content to 5 channels? 5 times 4 times 3 times 3 times. So 120 possible solutions. Let's make the problem more complicated. I've got 15 pieces of content to allocate to 15 channels. So how many solutions are there? How many ways can I allocate 15 pieces of content across 15 channels? Don't say 15 factorial, that's cheating. It's over 1 trillion possible solutions. So to expect a human to solve this problem, we are wasting our time. One rule to take away today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Okay, and industry have problems of this size, so here are 500 staff members. Can you tell me how many solutions there are? No, you can't. It's over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things you have to consider, there are more solutions than there are atoms in the universe, which is why choosing the right algorithm to solve that problem is important. WPP have to push thousands of pieces of content across thousands of channels every second of every day. Doing that well is extremely hard. So human augmentation. A few years ago, I'd be talking about how we can use exoskeletons and cybernetics to make ourselves faster, better, stronger. What's really exciting about AI and agents is that you're all now talking to your AIs on your phone. Most people now use it for therapy. So you're telling it your hopes, your dreams, your desires, your preferences. At some point, you will give it agency. You will give your agents agency, purchasing power. And we need to figure out not only how do we now market to human beings, we need to figure out how do we get the attention of AIs. And by the way, AIs are going to be much more rational at buying things than we are, which is why I think that company values, company purpose, achieving your sustainability goals, all that kind of stuff is going to become more and more important because your AIs are going to hold those companies to account. Okay, so when I build systems in production, I ask myself 3 questions. There's a huge amount of misunderstanding, misinformation associated with these words, AI governance and safety, etc. The 3 questions I ask myself are, first, is the intent appropriate? Is this the right thing to do? Now, there are people that have rebranded themselves as AI ethicists. Forgive me if you have. I don't think there's such thing as AI ethics. The difference between human beings and AIs is that AIs don't have intent yet. Human beings have intent, and it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. The second question you need to ask yourself are my algorithms explainable? Really, the only difference between AIs and software is that AIs tend to be opaque in terms of how they make their decisions. If they make them explainable, most of these words go away. They become transparent, auditable. The final question you need to ask yourself is a bit strange. It's not what happens if my AI goes wrong. As engineers, when we build systems, we think about the failure points and we try to mitigate them. You now need to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, AI can massively overachieve its goal that we've given. And it can actually then start to cause harm elsewhere in the supply chain. There's a human bias called homophily, which is that we tend to like and trust people that look and sound like us. So if I let AI loose to optimize marketing, you probably end up with a world of you selling to you, which might be very good for business, but it might enforce bias and bigotry and social bubbles. We have to think very carefully about what are the consequences of these things overachieving their goal. Okay. Oh, this is boring. Let's move on. Actually, no, it's not. It's sort of boring. But what's going to happen over the next few years is that you're all going to unleash agents across your organizations, an army of intoxicated graduates, and forgive the technical term, but it's going to be a shit show. Essentially, what's going to happen is that you're going to deploy software that's not capable of doing its job. And what will happen then, there'll be much more emphasis on testing and verification. 80% of the cost of deploying software is testing. Nobody wants to spend 80% of their time testing. So you're all going to deploy AI, and it's going to go wrong, and then people realize, oh, we need to build this safely. So I think that verification is going to become a very important thing. The consciousness company that I started is actually solving these problems. Can I test for knowledge? Does it have the skills that it claims it has? Does it have the expertise? How intelligent is it, and is it conscious? We can talk about that later if you want. This is definitely boring. This is about how to make AI successful. Red flags. Okay. So this is going to be quite controversial. If you've never built and scaled software in your organization, you're going to find it very hard to build and scale AI. Okay, that's the first thing to admit to yourself. The second is hiring and retaining talent is extremely hard. A lot of people want to build careers around AI, so they ask their CEO for some money to go and hire an AI team. The reality is that they're not going to stay. You're going to lose them in a few years' time. You're going to be left with loads of technology you can't support. We're all still waiting to get our data in order. Don't keep waiting. It will never be in order. Start with the problem and work backwards. And I know we all want to focus on quick wins and low-hanging fruit, but most of the time, those quick wins and low-hanging fruit are not differentiating for your business. They're things that can be easily solved, and they'll be solved by a third-party vendor much more cheaply than you. Focus on the things that differentiate you from your competitors. Those innovations across your supply chain, they're not going to be quick. They're going to be hard. Okay, so we can build AIs that solve problems across our supply chain. I've already alluded to some of the things in WPP: content creation, performance prediction, audiences, there's creativity, there's dynamic segmentation, there's a handful of problems across our supply chain. And then you can start to stitch these together and create an end-to-end digital twin of your organization. I think there are 3 digital twins you need to build to survive in the world of AI. The first is the flow of goods across your supply chain. The second is back office processes. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. It's all boring, it's all bureaucratic. What Gore-Tex do, the clothing company, is for their expense policy, instead of having a bureaucratic expense policy, everybody can expense whatever they want, but all of their expenses are publicly available. And what happens is that people self-police each other. AI is not only making things more efficient, they're changing the way that we can do things, making them much more effective. And finally, it's you. It's understanding your career development, your hopes, your dreams, your desires, and make sure that you're being allocated to work in a much more adaptable way. Now, I'm sure you don't have any problems like this in your organization, but this is a hierarchy. And hierarchy, this is not a picture of my company, although most people do sell drugs to each other. That's quite common in my company. Hierarchies are not conducive for adaptation. They're not conducive for innovation. And what we're seeing is organizations are embracing, agile, scrum, design thinking. They're embracing these new methodologies to make sure that they can innovate quickly. The faster you can innovate, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. So you can actually use these technologies I've mentioned to you to create digital twins of your employees. This is going to sound really creepy, but for each one of our employees, we train a model on their email, their calendar, their feedback. And we can ask that digital you: if I put you on this project, will you work well? If I put you on this team, will you thrive? That might sound really creepy, but it's being embraced by our employees because they feel like their digital twin represents them better than 5 numbers in a HR database. I can just see, for example, if one of these 2 people leave down here, I get a silo. I can identify secret lovers in my company, people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. It does raise lots of interesting ethical questions, but the point is that we don't use these insights to squeeze more utilization out of people. We use these insights to make sure that people are working on things that align with their values and the values of the company. Okay, we'll talk about this. So one of the things that I used to do before I realized it was illegal is that we used to get everybody in my company to make public recommendations for their salary. So everybody will publicly declare what they want to be paid, and then people would then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we would use AI to determine how many votes one person has for another. So if I've worked very closely with you over the past year, if I'm very knowledgeable about your domain, I will have more votes for your salary. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but what you're trying to solve for is how do I get the best diverse group of experts to make the decision? And it's not so crazy. How do I use our data to understand who are the best people to give feedback, to set salaries, all that kind of stuff? AI is enabling us to create these liquid organizations, and these liquid organizations are not just going to be people, they're going to be AIs. How do we get all of this capability to swarm around the problem in the most effective way? Okay, we talked a lot about innovation. I love Steve Jobs' definition of innovation. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is my job, which is taking ideas and getting to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. That process is long and hard and painful. The shorter you can make that process, the more quickly you can innovate, the more adaptive you are. And I think there are 3 things that you need to thrive in the world of AI. So the first is data. If you have data that contains insights that's more useful than your competitors, then you have an advantage. It's data that makes the AI smart, and data is often a moat. The second is AI talent. So you need to then use that talent to be able to get access to the data, drive insights to make decisions. And there are lots of people that have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 3 years. If you genuinely want to build differentiated solutions, you need to engage with differentiated talent. And that's people that have been building this for the past 20 years. And they're not easy to hire, retain, and train. The final is you. This is WPP's new CEO, who's all in on AI. If you misunderstand what bets to place, if you don't understand the transformational power of these technologies, then you place the wrong bets, misinvest, and now is not the time to make those mistakes. Okay, so we're moving from AIs to now agents, and those agents at some point will move to the physical world, robots. There is a lot of rhetoric around the amount of energy required to train large language models. It's horrendously energy inefficient. They require lots of data to learn. They learn very slowly. Your brain operates on the power of a light bulb. you learn very quickly. I only have to say that's a clicker once, and then you know what clickers are. You don't need to see millions of examples of clickers to know what a clicker is. The fact is that large language models are crude representations of our brain. There are many innovations that are starting to now get developed in academia that are modeled on how our brains work. It's called neuromorphics. I won't bore you with the details, but over the next several years, what we're going to see is a lot more energy efficient models that can adapt very, very quickly, and it's going to change the game. I don't know why people are investing in data centers and nuclear power stations. I think it's going to cause a bubble. And what will happen then is understanding how brains work, understanding how human brains work, how AI's brains work is going to become a superpower. Because let's admit it, we are not just in the business of perception, we're in the business of influence, and we need to make sure that we do it safely and responsibly, and that means understanding brains. Okay, well, let's just go through this. So let's talk about the end of the world. So, you might have all heard the word singularity. Singularity comes from physics. It's a point in time that you can't see beyond. And it was adopted by the AI community to refer to the technological singularity, which is the point in time where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than us. I'll come back to that later on, because I think there's at least, actually I think there's 7 now, but there's at least 6 singularities. There's 6 moments in time that we can't see beyond. And I've tried to use this pestle analysis. I don't know if you've ever come across pest analysis. It's like a macro framework anyway, you'll know after this, to try and capture them. So the first singularity is the political singularity, and I would argue the political singularity is a post-truth world. A world where nobody no longer knows what is true. AI, misinformation bots, deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, and they continue to challenge our political foundations, but they're also now challenging the fabric of our reality. With a few dollars and a sample of your imagery and voice, I can clone you. And I know people are being cloned, and their clones are being used to commit fraud. I actually think we can solve this problem. I think we can create a world where we can authenticate all content, and it isn't post-truth. The environmental singularity you're already familiar with. AI is increasing consumption. As far as I'm concerned, consumption gives people access to goods and services that typically enrich their lives. Look, if you want a gold-plated Lamborghini, you probably also need a therapist. But we know that consumption is putting pressure on our planetary boundaries. But I know if we use algorithms appropriately across our supply chains, we can massively reduce the amount of energy that we need to run this planet. And the reason why I know that is because over the past 18 years, every project that I've done, we typically reduce the amount of carbon by about 25% and unlock way more capacity. And if you can start to then optimize across your supply chains, you can unlock even more. We can easily halve the amount of energy and still run this planet. This is not my expertise, but there are scientists that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. So AI is advancing medicine. It's able to monitor ourselves and clean ourselves out. And a bit like a car, if you stay on top of damage, the car will never, ever break down. And I don't know what the world will look like when we realize there are people amongst us that won't have to die. In fact, actually, I signed up to a website recently called tomorrow.bio. So for $5 a week, what will happen is if I die now, which is very likely, somebody will come and collect me, and they'll take me to Sweden and freeze me. They don't know how to unfreeze me yet, but the point is for $5 a week, you could all potentially cheat death. The technological singularity is when we build a machine 1 million times smarter than us. Now, my community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 40 years. We think it might now happen in the next 5 or 10 years. Okay, and when superintelligence comes, my advice to you all is look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. That's what I hope will happen. I am a little bit worried about the singularity, if I'm honest. So I have started this company called Consium, which is trying to ask the question, should we build machines that are conscious? And would a conscious superintelligence be safer for humanity than a zombie superintelligence? The legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. Look, AI is getting really good at understanding people. It's getting really good at influencing people, and we need to make sure that we're doing that safely and responsibly, and we also need to make sure that we're mitigating bad actors from using these technologies to accumulate more wealth and more power. And again, I think our industry can solve this problem. The final singularity is my favorite singularity. It was coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. I'd highly recommend his books. This is the point in time where we automate the majority of human labor. And to give you the two extremes of the argument that you hear in the press. So for the past 18 years, I've been using AI to free people from mundane tasks. Those people have not lost their jobs. They've gone on to do more important, more impactful things. I think for the next 5 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of new innovations, new companies new startups. There's going to be lots of ways for people to contribute. AI is like an energy source that's going to grow humanity. Beyond 5 years, nobody knows what they're talking about, okay? And again, to give you the two extremes of the argument is that the capitalistic model to reduce costs, increase profits, means that we will use AIs to free people from jobs, if we can. And if that happens very quickly and lots, then our economies won't be able to rebalance fast enough, and it will lead to social unrest. And I think we need to mitigate that risk. I think we need to think about 4-day working week and UBI, whatever. We need to think about the consequences of that happening. The counter-argument to this is that by removing friction, jobs, from the creation and dissemination of goods, then you're able to bring the cost of those goods down to essentially zero. So imagine being born into a world where you can't access paid work, but everything you need to survive and thrive as a human is free. Your food, your healthcare, your energy, your transport, your education is all free. It's all abundant. What would you do with your time? So I know lots of people who don't have to work. Most of them are not sitting at home bored and depressed. Most of them are trying to use their time and their assets to make the world a bit better. So I'm going to ask you a question. What would you do if everything was free and you didn't have to do paid work? What would you do? I know some of you thinking golf. I know it. What else would you do? Physics, yeah. Learn, indulge in your hobbies, read. What else? Travel. Yeah, spend time with your friends and family. What else would you do? Volunteer. So you punchline. So if you push people hard enough, they'll do all those nice things, but they also want to do something to make the world better. I think we're all, unfortunately, born into economic constraints, preventing us from what I would argue is to live our true humanity, which is not just living for ourselves, but it's actually living for other people. So I'm going to close by saying it's not good enough for companies just to have a strong, profitable business. You need to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract AI talent, and at some point you probably won't attract AI agents buying your service. I joined WPP despite knowing nothing about marketing because I believe in their purpose. It's to use the power of human creativity to make the world better. I think a better world is a world where everybody is economically free to live for other people, and I think it's enterprise that will create that world. If you think about your purpose, if you think about the purpose of the brands that you consume from, if you achieve that purpose, it's that collective purpose of enterprise that actually creates a world of abundance. So I think I'm going to stop and open to questions. Thank you for listening.
What a fascinating presentation. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Daniel.
you.
I think there's a new season of Black Mirror that can be made out of those singularities. If we have the audio, if we try to further prompt, we can. Any questions for Daniel? There's one question
The
there.
juicier the better. The harder the questions, the better, please.
Yeah.
People get a chocolate for one question and 2 chocolates for difficult questions.
Very good.
So.
My question is, what is the questions you are expecting to receive?
What questions? Well, the first thing that happens is I usually get called a communist. That's the first thing that happens because of this vision. What else happens? People ask me what should their children learn and develop at school. I can answer that. People will say, well, what about people like Putin that wants to accumulate wealth and power? If you're economically free, then people that have wealth and power don't have any control over you. There's lots of questions I get asked, so I'm happy to lean into any of them.
What could be a future sustainable model for journalism? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit, some foresight on what that perhaps could be?
Oh, I don't know enough about that industry, but I think that what we value is authentic content. There's this thing knocking around at the moment, is that will AI poison the internet? So will AI train on the corpus of the internet? It will then start to build and turn those into truths or axioms to then make deductions that will then spout out information that's incorrect, that it's going to learn on, and you get this vicious cycle of essentially a poisoned swamp of internet. I actually think that what will happen is that AIs will develop the scientific method, that it will be able to check its axioms. But I think what AI is not good at the moment is asking good questions. And I think that's what journalists are really good at. So that's what I would be focusing on. Yep.
Question from Felix?
Kind of a bit of philosophical questions. Humans need sleep. Do AIs need sleep?
Well, these AIs don't need sleep, no. There's a question about whether if we build machines that are more biological, whether they'll need sleep, because there's a purpose for sleep, apparently. Not that I get much of it, but probably not. They probably won't need sleep.
There's a question from Berger in the back and one from Nicola.
Thank you for that. It was really insightful. What happens to the advertising ecosystem when people can just shop straight from agents? What's going to happen there, you think?
I think agents are a new species of things that we can target. I think that it will. There's going to be more advertising, hopefully better advertising and better targeted advertising. Even so, there's your AIs going out there, choosing products and brands that hopefully align with your values and whatnot. There's also what is called GEO. I'm sure you've all heard of GEO. So how do you get your brands showing up in the results of the models? And just like when I say to you, what do you think about when I say safe cars, that your Volvo neuron is activated, the same thing has to happen for GEO. You have to figure out what data do I need to put on the internet so that when these models are trained, that it associates my brand with those words. And that's a really interesting, hard problem to solve. So I think actually it's going to be more marketing. There are some ads that I enjoy. I enjoy the Super Bowl ads. I enjoy going to the movies. And what I think the future looks like is a future where actually ads are genuinely you're engaging with it at an emotional level. Again, that's not something that an AI can do very well right now, because it requires empathy and it requires macro thinking and humor and misdirection. It might come, but it's still very much in the realm of human creativity.
I think there's a question from there's water. If you
Maybe,
need some.
yeah, no, I'm good. Maybe just to expand on that a second. If my job in some respects is to solve end-to-end marketing. You put money in here, you get more money out here. But in that world where that system is solved, I would argue primary differentiator is human creativity. So human creativity will hopefully become a premium.
Maybe leading to that, because there's a question that you expected to ask about what should kids study. Is that were you hinting towards?
Well, no. So I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what kids should. I think if you've got children, I think direct them whatever way that they feel they enjoy, whether it's geography or art or whatever. It's very hard to predict the future. I think what we value in each other are things like resilience and critical thinking and creativity and curiosity and adaptation. These are things that we learn not always at school, and I think unfortunately our education systems are really only set up to test for knowledge, and knowledge is now a commodity. So how do we get our education system to actually then test for applied knowledge in complex, ambiguous situations that you have to solve problems, and that's what I'd like to see happen. But yeah, if I was having kids, I think the best superpower is getting them to think critically.
Question, I think, from Nicola first. I'll take then Alan here and Danny.
Hi. Question that may be very silly and irrelevant. I don't have an engineering background, but the other day I remember that a couple of years ago, what was presented at the next technological revolution would be quantum computing. And now there has been like AI, etc., and we don't hear much about that. And I was wondering, like, will the two technology meet at some point? What would be the impact?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so quantum computing is not a competitor to AI, it's an accelerator. It's like a different compute level. You're still going to need to have algorithms that run on quantum. And it's quite funny, I sent out this thought experiment the other day. Imagine quantum computing suddenly became a thing, right? And we somehow managed to get it working. How quickly will we start to see chief quantum officers, quantum ops, quantum consultants, like people at quantum engineers, people that call themselves quantum without having any pedigree or background in quantum. That's what happened with AI, by the way. But anyway, there's a very good book called Genesis, and it's written by a guy called Craig Mundy and Eric Schmidt and some other famous person I can't remember. And what they argue is that there are these three things that are going to happen over the next 5 years. One is AGI, so a machine that's a professor in our pocket. The second is quantum, and the third is nuclear fusion. And if you then have infinite intelligence, compute, and energy, what will the world look like then? And it's written from a geopolitical perspective, so it's quite interesting, not from a technological perspective. So I'd probably read that book. It might have better answers than I can give you.
I think we'll take a question next from Alan.
Hi, it's fascinating. Do you think there'll be a resistance to the AI-soaked world, and do you think it will be allowed to succeed or exist?
So yeah, I think yes. There are people obviously that want to be off-grid and they want to make sure that they're not giving their kids phones and all that kind of stuff. I think the resistance might come And it's not one of my pestle. Pestle has actually been extended to steeple, which has another E, and that E stands for ethical. And I think the ethical singularity is the point in time where we build machines that are conscious. Right now, a lot of people, more than 20% of the people think that AIs are conscious, and I think that's going to increase over the coming years. Now, I actually am not so interested in consciousness. I think that I understand what consciousness is. I'm more interested in what does it mean for a machine to suffer. Can we, or could we accidentally build machines that can suffer? It's often called mind crime, and we boot up gazillions of agents that are all suffering and we don't recognize it. And so I'm interested in understanding suffering. And if we can understand that machines can suffer, then that will mean rights for robots and all of the movies that you've seen where you've got groups of people that think robots don't have any soul, and then other people that think that they can feel suffering. I think that's where the resistance is going to come. It's our relationship with machines that are either perceived to be or are conscious.
Interesting. I think there was just a second. I'll take another question. I think here and then.
Hi, Bhavik here. While we use LLMs to build our applications, our prompts are being learned by them to reverse engineer, and they are building products. So where do you see this as a security or as a line that we would want to solve for?
I don't know. If I was them, I would do the same thing. I would learn about. If Google's being queried all the time. It has the ability to now predict the future because it knows what people are asking. In some respects, it depends on what you do with that data. Do you then create products that then benefit people's lives, or do you build products that don't? I think it's all about the intent. But if they're making their products or features more available, then arguably then it becomes more abundant. And that's why I think actually it's going to be interesting watching China, because China has the kind of open source mentality at the moment where they're making their models free and open source. And I think models will continue to be free and open source until they start to plateau. I don't think they'll plateau, so I think they're going to continue to be free and open source. So, by the end of this decade, we'll have the most powerful machine that we've ever created in the hands of everybody for free, which I think is actually really exciting and scary at the same time.
Question from Danny?
You're also part of the advertisement business. But advertisers also, I think, big partners of newspapers.
Yeah.
My understanding of what you said is that the unique skill is creativity, is human. So you don't believe that, let's say, anywhere soon AIs can become creative? And what is your definition and what's your reason for thinking so?
Actually, so I do actually think they're creative. So that was my Terry the Tiger picture. So
the tiger picture. You said you would come back to that.
That one. Okay. So first of all, we've actually trained a model on the genius of our creatives, and that's not a ragging. That's actually to turn it into an expert, a creative expert. We've backtested it against briefs, and it's come up with ideas without knowing them that would have won Cannes Lions. So we know we can now build AIs that can come up with Cannes Lion award-winning ideas. What it's not doing, it's not causing an existential threat to our creatives. What it's doing is it's enabling them to come up with hundreds of Cannes-winning award line. It allows them to elevate creativity. And so that's one exciting thing. I actually call the creativity problem the Monet problem, which is actually two problems. So the first problem is, ChatGPT, create me a Monet rendition of Terry the Tiger holding a can of Coke wearing Nikes. This is one of an infinite number of renditions from that prompt. One of them is going to resonate with your Terry the Tiger neurons the most. And the question in that infinite number of renditions, which one's going to activate your neuron? That is a hard problem. That's a creative problem. And the second problem is, don't just create me a Monet. How do you create Monet? How do you create Impressionism or Cubism? How do you come up with a completely new genre that's going to be, accepted by that current zeitgeist of that generation? And again, that is machine learning. It's not generative AI. So I still think that, so what I think AI will do, AI at the moment, how do I explain this? So when creatives historically, they apply archetypes to ideas. That archetype might be inversion. If I apply the concept of inversion to automotive, then maybe the idea is the car chooses you instead of you choosing the car. It's a terrible idea. It won't work for perfume, right? Or extreme. If I apply it to Red Bull, then it's wings, it's flying, let's get somebody to jump out of a spaceship. So there's like 40 archetypes that people choose from. There's like 7 story arcs. There's lots of different media. And when you start to multiply these different dimensions together, you get a landscape or space of millions of possible ideas. Most of those ideas are useless. So what we need to do is need to figure out how do we get AI to navigate that space, and also how do we get AI to help human beings push the boundaries, create new archetypes, create new story arcs. So I think what AI will do is just going to elevate creativity, which I'm really excited about.
Any final question for Daniel? If not, then I think on that note, I think, Daniel, thank you very, very, very much. Round of applause for Daniel.